I'm Ken Earlbaugh. I'm the current president of the 101 Lakes Trust. Thanks for all coming out here today to our 5th annual Reflections event. Can I see a show of hands of people who made all 5? Not too shabby. How about people from Lake Gage today? Okay, wow. Okay, so we got a lot of people who got on Lake Gage who probably haven't been on it before. So that's the hope. That was the hope, the whole inspiration of starting these reflections, giving people opportunity to visit other lakes they wouldn't normally go on. So thanks for all the volunteers with the pontoons today, and I assume you all enjoyed your boat rides. Just a little background, the 101 Lakes Trust has been around since 2006, and our mission statement is, and I don't want to get it wrong, is to protect and enhance Steuben County's natural and built environment of lakes, rolling hills, streams, and neighborhoods to stimulate and support a sense of community through conservation, management, education, and research. So today we pretty much were covering the education. You're going to hear a nice little history talk here, and you look like a really stimulated community right now. So we got 2 of our goals of the mission statement to care. Our motto is CPR, conservation, protect, and restoration, environmentally. Little things that we've done so far as a land trust is, back when we first formed was when Pokagon was, the Calvary Christian Camp was being for sold, Old Oak Hill, and we got involved with Pokagon, and were pretty instrumental in getting that turned over to the park. They used our 501c status, and we wrote a letter and said, if we can get it, we'll donate it to you. And then the DNR really assisted us in obtaining it. And thanks to Mr. Trine, he stepped up and purchased it and handed it over. Currently, we are working with the Steuben County Commissioners to do a stewardship program on some property they have that most of them are little wetlands that feed directly into the lakes. And our first one will be dedicated a little bit later this fall. Look in the newspaper for when that will be, and we'll get announcements out. So other than that, I had to make sure Joe didn't run away. I had the privilege of being the presenter last year, and I can say I'm very happy I'm not the presenter this year. So as much as I learned and everything last year, I am glad Joe is able to step up and give us a reflection on Lake Gage. And by luck, he had a book by the same name, and we'll let the lawyers handle the copyright infringement of the title of the event and the book, and we'll all be happy. So without further ado, here's Joe Weaver.
As Ken said, my name is Joe Weaver. I'm only a second generation property owner on Lake Gage, but my parents bought the property where our house now stands in 1939. A few years later, I was born, and my mother and I, from my first summer, spent virtually every summer, all summer, at the lake through my school years. After that, of course, school and career took me away, but I still came back as often as I could. In 1987, my wife Sandy and I realized that the old house, actually a cottage that we had on Lake Gage, was in some very much needed repair. And after studying several options, we decided to tear the old house down and build a new house, more modern and with a lot of the luxuries they didn't have in 1939. Later on, in 1995, we remodeled that house, moved here from Fort Wayne, and made that our permanent residence. So we've been at Lake Gage now for 16 years permanently as full-time residents. I've been coming to Lake Gage nearly 70 years, and I truly enjoy every moment I spend out there. We think it's a wonderful place to live. So, based on that, we'll go ahead and get started. I hope you enjoyed your ride around the lake today, around Lake Gage, or Rainbow Lake, as the Native American Indians called it. Supposedly, they gave it that name due to the various colors that you can sometimes see on the lake's surface just before and during a gentle rainstorm. And it's said that those colors are the result of the marl bottom in parts of the lake. Marl is a type of clay that will give off a pigment under certain conditions. So the Indians legend has it anyway, called it Lake Gage. There's no definitive answer as to where the real name Lake Gage came from. There's nothing that could be found, at least in any of the research that I've been able to do. One theory that seems to keep coming out is that there was an early settler named Isaac Gage who owned 80 acres of property near the south side of Lake Gage. And perhaps because of that, the lake was named after him. Prior to the 1800s, Lake Gage was the sole domain of the Potawatomi Indians, the Pokagon branch of the Potawatomi Indians. They used the lake for hunting and fishing. They didn't have a permanent campsite on the lake. That site was in or near Coldwater, Michigan. But they come to the lake for their game and for their entertainment, I suppose. So in the early development of Gage, well, in perspective, let me back up just a little bit. In perspective, the area around this part of the country didn't see any white settlers until about 1830. In 1831, two men settled in an area called Jackson Prairie, which is somewhat south of Orland, about 3 miles. These guys' names were Gideon Langdon and Fred Stainer. Fred's brother John became one of the earliest property owners in the Lake Gage area. Angola itself, again in perspective, wasn't platted until 1838. The town of Orland, which was then called the Vermont Settlement because of the large number of people of Vermont who had moved to this area, was actually started in 1834, and that's why they call it the birthplace of Steuben County. It was actually one of the first developed towns in this area. The settlement around Gage began, as I said, around 1831. In 1835, a man named Justice Butler moved here from Elyria, Ohio, and for a year lived in a structure called a camp, which was a 3-sided building with a roof. The 4th side was left completely open. There was no doorway. It was just an opening into the shelter. In 1836, Mr. Butler went back to Elyria and moved his family to Lake Gage. And then in 1837, he acquired 313 acres on the south side of the lake and another 54 acres on the east side of the lake. He got that in a deed signed personally by President Martin Van Buren in August the 1st of 1837. This is a picture of Mr. Butler's homestead. On his property was a stream that led into Lake Gage from Crooked Lake. And on the stream, he built a sawmill and equipped it with what was called a whipsaw. And in that mill, he would cut the native lumber, haul it to his point where he wanted to build his house, which is on the southeast side of the lake, and he began to build his buildings. He had apparently no particular plan for the buildings. He would just, as they happened, they happened. He would add a room as needed. They had 11 children as they were living in this area. Only 3 of them lived to adulthood, and one of those children, the son, Joseph Butler, became a prominent Steuben County attorney and land developer. This is a picture of Joseph Butler with his wagon. This land, as you see, is flat. It was about 300 yards away from the lake, but the lane you see leading in front of him actually went down to the lake between his farm buildings. The house that he lived in also, in 1884, he put in a post office, which obviously became the Lake Gage Post Office. And he built a 2-story structure on the lakefront, which is the white building you see on the right side there, that he called Tel-All. In those days, people liked to name their properties and name their homes. This is again another picture of that one. Very simple building, 2 stories, but that's where Joseph Butler raised his family. There's no remaining evidence of any of the Butler properties anymore, any of the buildings. However, some of the Butler residents still do live around Lake Gage and own property either on or near the lake. But the buildings themselves have long gone. In approximately 1870, and the records seem to differ on this, the Lake Gage Cemetery was established. And this is on what is now County Road 550 West, which is about a half mile to the east of Lake Gage. Some of the early settlers' tombstones are evident in this cemetery, and they're so readable. A lot of the Butlers are buried here. There was a town called Concord that was also established on County Road 550 West in about the 1890s. The town was laid out and platted, however, no structures were ever built. Nothing ever became of the town. It was just an anomaly, so to speak, that they planned to build something there and it just never happened. It was from that area, though, that the creek that leads into Lake Gage from Crooked Lake got the name of Concord Creek. This is another one of the Butler properties that was right on the lakefront. It's hard to read it, but the name on the house is Happy Hooligan. The road that led by Lake Gage on the south side was narrow and kind of hazardous, but it was still at that time a main route between Toledo and Chicago. And at one time, the P.T. Barnum Circus was traveling through the area, and the motivation for the wagons for the circus were provided by the circus animals, the elephants, the zebras, camels, horses, whatever they could use to pull the wagons. It's said that this particular day, the entourage completely stopped and they unfastened all of the animals and brought them down to the lakefront for watering and to be cooled. In 1906, I'm sorry, let me back up on that. In 1890, Lloyd Waterhouse, whose home is this large white building, built the first rental cottage on Lake Gage, which was located right at this point out here. This was White Waterhouse's house. And, this is Orland Road coming into Lake Gage. It was then called the Sperry Highway. And this is what's now South Lake Gage Drive. The Butler farm is down at this point. So the Butlers owned it up until about this point. Then Waterhouse owned the property on the northeast side of the lake, stretching clear down to what is called Panama. The rental property that Waterhouse built on the lakefront was later converted into a grocery store called Oddstock's Landing. This was the first grocery store on this side of the lake. It became several things through the years. Oddstock's Landing, it was George's Grocery, it was the Lake Gage Trading Post, it was the Lake Gage Magic Grocery, it was the Lake Gage Galley and Pub, and now it's a residence. The building still stands and it's basically the same structure. The shell is at least the same structure. The population in the area continued to grow, and in 1898, the Lake Gage School was built. The school was built on County Road 550 West, again in the area that was primarily going to be the town of Concord. The school was in continuous operation until 1922, when it was closed. And the students of that school were moved to the school in Flint, Indiana. shore of Lake Gage. This is Poland Road. Around the turn of the 20th century, the lakes in northern Indiana became very popular tourist destinations as the people from the cities wanted to get to the lakes to be cool and escape the summer heat. I'm sure you're aware, a lot of hotels popped up on most of the lakes around here, on Crooked Lake and Lake James. Lake Gage wasn't any different. Two men from Angola named Edson Wilder and Milton Rose realized the potential, and they bought a property on the west side of Lake Gage, where there were, at that time, 2 cottages. They then, in the spring of 1901, built a hotel that they called the Shady Nook. This is a copy of one of their flyers showing that they had reasonable rates and fine fishing and a bathing beach, special Sunday chicken dinners. In 1902, the second year they were open, the hotel's rates were $7 per week, and that included a free rowboat. This is the Shady Nook Hotel. It was a very popular spot, and the owners of the hotel, since there were no passable roads, or very passable roads, I should say, in the area, would travel by carriage to meet train passengers in Bronson, Michigan, and Angola, and transport them off to the lake for them to stay at the hotel. Later on, the hotel acquired a covered launch, and they would meet people coming from the St. Joe Valley Line Railway with their launch and take them across the lake to the hotel. The Shady Nook, in this picture, is like up here. This is a boathouse, and you can see here's some of the rowboats that they use for the rental property. More of the Shady Nook. This is a picture of the boat that they actually use to meet their passengers from the St. Joe Valley Line Railway. They come across the lake, and obviously when they went to this means of transportation, using the railway to get passengers out to the lake, the population of the hotel really gained in popularity. In the summer of 1907, the Shady Nook hosted a Chautauqua type event that they called the Lake Gage Assembly and Summer School. And it ran from July 3rd to August 31st of that year. And each day they had a different type of event. There would be political debates, there were speeches, they would have sermons, they would have band concerts, whatever they thought would be interesting for the local people to come and see. Now, apparently it was a very popular event because newspaper accounts said that hundreds of people attended the events throughout that 2-month period of time. This is a view of what they call the assembly landing. The Shady Nook would have been off to the right of this picture. Due to the failing health of the owners, Wilder and Rose, the hotel was sold to a man named Salisbury, who was an Orland insurance agent and real estate developer. He leased the hotel to a man named D.W. Strauss, and Mr. Strauss brought his children, Carl and Lucille, into the hotel, and they ran a grocery store within the hotel. This was the situation until 1925, when the Strausses decided to open their own grocery store just a short ways up the road from the Shady Nook, and they called it the Home Grocery. Later they changed the name to the Strauss Grocery. This particular grocery store was in existence until the late 1950s and early 60s. It was said that Carl Strauss, the owner, would take grocery orders and deliver groceries across the lake via a rowboat. He would get in his rowboat and deliver them to wherever people on the lake were. As a service, I guess, for their customers. There's an ad from the Strauss grocery. This particular ad was found in the building. This particular store is still existing. It's a residence now. When they did the remodeling, within the walls, they found this ad for the Strauss grocery. And you can see in the bottom line it says free delivery service. After the Strausses left the Shady Nook, the grounds were sold to a man named William Kuhlman from Auburn. And one of the first things that Mr. Kuhlman did was build a toboggan slide on the Shady Nook property. This was a high slide that daredevils could use to ride from the top of the hill down to the lake. He had a Model T engine from a car that he would use to pump water to the top of the slide to make it slippery for the riders to go down. This was also a very popular venue for people. They would come from Angola and nearby towns just to ride the water slide in the summer. Here's a view of looking down the slide. You can see there are a lot of steps. They had to walk back up on the top of the slide before they could ride down to the water. But obviously, too, you can see there are a lot of people in the lake that were using it that day. Finally, before I leave the Shady Nook, I want to make a comment that contrary to rumors and legends about every other hotel on every other lake in northern Indiana, there's absolutely no record of John Dillinger staying at the Shady Nook. He was a busy man and a busy bank robber and hotel guest, but he never made it to the Shady Nook. In 1906, the developer Lloyd Waterhouse, who had built the large white house I showed you earlier, planted the first development on the north side of Lake Gage, and he called it Panama. He laid it out to look like a small village with a road between every 4 cottages, and going both along the side of the lake and going back. He named it Panama because he recently visited that country and was taken by the architecture there and wanted to bring it out to Lake Gage. He built his first cottage there in 1907, and in 1914, a man named Theodore Geller and his daughter Louise built a structure in Panama that was their living quarters, a bakery, a grocery store, and a greenhouse. The hill above their store was the stop for the Valley Line, the Valley Line Railroad. This is a copy, a picture of the Geller grocery here. This is the trail that led down to the boat launch on Lake Gage from the Valley Line Railway. And I'm assuming this is the Geller family standing out here. I'm sorry. In the early 1920s, a man from Orland named Art Kelso built a dance hall on Lake Gage. And it was in the Panama area and quite unique in that it had both an inside and outside dance floor. The inside floor was glass and was illuminated so that the dancers would be like dancing on light at nighttime. Various big bands of the era stopped by to perform in Lake Gage on their way between Detroit and Chicago or vice versa. Some of the bands that actually put on shows at the Council Gardens were Jimmy Dorsey, Count Basie, and Lionel Hampton. In addition to those, of course, local bands also would perform there every weekend. In the late 20s, a family named Bledsoe from Lake James purchased the Kelso Garden, and supposedly because it had produced so much competition for their facility called Bledsoe's Beach, closed down the dance hall. The only thing that's left now is the concrete floor, but everything else of Kelso Gardens is now gone. The St. Joe Valley Line Railway was the dream of a man from Elkhart called Herbert Buckland. Buckland's plan was to build an interurban railway that would connect Chicago with with Toledo. He began construction in Elkhart, and in 1907, he reached the town of Orland in the spring, and in August that year, he made it to Angola. This map shows the route of 1912 of the St. Joe Valley Line Railway. The red dotted line is their route. The railway enters the county on the left side after a station in Mongo, went up to Orland, came kind of southeasterly to Lake Gage, where the stop, and you can see it, maybe you can see it, says Panama here. Came on more southeasterly to an area called Inverness, then went on to the north side of Crooked Lake and stopped at the Sheets Hotel, and more southeasterly toward the north side of Angola before turning east and heading toward Ohio. As you can see on this map, the railway wasn't even extended to the boundaries of Steuben County. There were several routes that were studied when Buckland was building his railway, and he looked at both the north and south sides of Lake Gage, and he chose the south side for two reasons. One, he wanted to make a terminal for the Shady Nook Hotel, and two, because the south side of the lake presented some problems with swampy land and uneven terrain, so he decided not to go that way, so he built it on the north side. This is a picture of the station that he built in a little area called Inverness, which is about a half a mile east of Lake Gage along Owen Road. Inverness actually grew into a small community for a while, but it was dependent pretty much on the railway. This is near the intersection of Orland Road and County Road 400 North. He called it Inverness. Buckland named it Inverness because he said it reminded him of his home in Inverness, Scotland. The railway ceased operation in 1918 due to the death of its founder, Herbert Buckland, and the advent of the automobile as a more convenient type of transportation. Interestingly enough, speaking of Inverness, though Inverness and Panama were never officially recorded as Indiana towns, a lot of Indiana maps, road maps, will show Inverness and Panama on them as little dots northeast of Angola. Until the early 1930s, Lake Gage and Lime Lake were connected by a small, narrow, shallow channel. And fishermen and boaters who wanted to go from one lake to another would have to push their boats through, or in some cases actually pick them up and carry them to get from one lake to another. So in 1936, the WPA, under Franklin Roosevelt's administration, the New Deal program, came into the area, dug the channel deeper, lined it with rocks from one end to the other, and constructed the stone bridge. You can see here that the bridge actually had electric lights on it at one time. This is looking west from the bridge out into the line. So, the area around Gage has steadily continued to grow from the 1900s, the early 1900s through present day. A topographical map of the lake in 1923 showed that there were 80 cottages around the perimeter of Lake Gage. The most recent count said that there are about 300. About 30% of those cottages or homes are now full-time residential homes. I don't know where the driver of that car went. It looks like it went for a swim. So in closing, I'd like to say thanks to Darlene Schimmeler of Lake Gage. Darlene was kind enough to share her collection of vintage photos that I've been showing here today. Without them, we would have lost a very important record of what had happened out there, some of the more important buildings. That is the end of my program. I took you from early 1800s through 1930. Since that time, things have progressed around the lake as they have around all the other lakes in this area. There's steady growth and more population. Nothing significant of historical importance has happened from then on. I'll be happy to stay around after the program if any of you have any questions that I can try to answer. And I'll turn the program back over to Ken.
Was that a nice presentation? Thanks a lot. Having given the presentation last year, I know it's a lot of work involved with it and everything, and one of the benefits is that we present to Joe Boster of the event, and I love mine. It sits very prominent in my house. I assume it will in his.
Oh, absolutely.
So thank you very much. And also I would say this is being filmed by the 101 Network, and be looking for it in the fall on the Channel 20 if you have local cable. I believe that pretty much completes our program tonight, unless I'm forgetting something. Oh, wait, oh, Bill looks like there's something going on. Oh, okay, then that's pretty much it, unless, like Joe will be around to answer questions. And if you have any questions with the 101, I will be around here for a while. So thank you for coming tonight, and I had a good time, hope you did.
Thank you, Ken.
Oh, no, that's...